Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. I am your host. I'm Darlene Childress. I am a life and parenting coach and the host of this podcast. And today I'm going to talk about rethinking ADHD. I did an episode a while back called Understanding ADHD with Lainey Donnell. And she's an educational therapist. And that was a really great episode. And a lot of you have told me how important that episode was in helping you understand a little bit more about the dynamics of ADHD. And I wanted to do another episode where I'm just talking to you and sharing with you about what I understand about ADHD, and especially understanding how to raise someone who has ADHD. So one of my kids has pretty severe ADHD, definitely was a big issue when he was littler in terms of, hyperactivity and impulse control and those kinds of things. And now as he's gotten older, it's a little bit more around understanding time blindness, which I'm going to get into, and in attention and motivation and all of these things. So I'm speaking to you. I'm not an expert on ADHD, but as a parenting coach, a lot of the people that I work with have kids who have ADHD, or the parent has ADHD. It's funny because I'm going to get ahead of myself here, but with ADHD, a lot of times the child needs to borrow our executive function, our thinking brain, and they need to borrow our nervous system in order to calm themselves. And what I find sometimes as a coach is some of you hire me because you want to borrow my nervous system because you're highly aroused and activated and reactive as a parent, and you want tools to calm your stress response. Yeah. And then some of you are like, I just need to know strategies and how to think about parenting and what to do. And in that way, you're borrowing my prefrontal cortex, right? My thinking brain. So all of our children, when they're born, they do not have advanced or mature prefrontal cortex, and their nervous system is also highly reactive and difficult to regulate. And so your children are always borrowing your nervous system, and they're borrowing your prefrontal cortex. They're borrowing your ability to manage your feelings, and they're borrowing your thinking. Now that's true for all of our kids, whether they have ADHD or not. The difference, if you're raising a kid with ADHD, is that they are going to need to borrow those skills from you for a longer period of time because of the way their brain is wired. Those neurons and the neural pathways that can be developed, that will be developed, they are harder for them to access. And they need support and they need help. A kid who has ADHD as a little kid isn't going to use a phone or a calendar system or some sort of alarm system, right? They're not going to be cued by technology. But then if you have an adult who has ADHD and they learn all these strategies to cue them, or their partner is willing to cue them and support them and give them, hey, remember, you got to get going on this project because it's due tomorrow. And what's your process? And prompting them with those questions. People with ADHD need that support. And adults who have successfully learned how to manage their ADHD bring those supports into their life. They build their life in a way that supports them. When they are children and young adult and adolescents, they're going to be borrowing you. You're the one who really creates order out of the chaos that's going on for them. And that can be difficult because if you're raising a kid with neurodivergence, you might be talking to another mom about your kids, and your experience is vastly different. What they're dealing with or what you're dealing with is very different from what they're dealing with because your child is delayed. They are neurodivergent. They are diverging from typical. So we have neurotypical, neurodivergent. We have a typical pathway, what a typical brain would go through, and then we have a divergent pathway. So if you're raising a kid who's neurodivergent, they're going to go through milestones at a different pace. You're going to have challenges that look differently. So it's important that you don't compare your child's development with their peers who are neurotypical. You want to be really comparing your child's development to themselves, their past self to their present self, and their future self. Where are they going? Creating that positive vision about what they're going to learn how to do, and trusting that they're going to figure it out. So that's one of the first things I wanted to talk about with this topic of rethinking ADHD, is that really we want to recognize that all children borrow our nervous system and borrow our prefrontal cortex. They borrow our thinking and feeling brains, and we're helping them learn how to think and learn how to feel, right? They know how to feel, but how to process that feeling, right? They know how to think, but how to communicate what they're thinking. So all kids do that. And then neurodivergent kids, particularly kids with ADHD, borrow those systems longer. That is normal for them. And the sooner you're able to recognize that they're on their own timetable, they're on their own path, the less frustrated you'll be when you see some of the traits and behaviors that come up with ADHD, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Now, why is it important to rethink ADHD? Why is it important for me to come on this podcast and talk about this topic with you? And the reason it's important is because a lot of kids who grow up with ADHD end up with a negative self-concept. They end up with a collection of thoughts about themselves that are negative. My vision for all of you, right, is to heal the next generation in advance. I want your kids to not spend their 20s and 30s healing from childhood trauma. Instead, I want them to have all the tools and coping skills and awareness and all of that positive mindset and all those things that they take with them into their 20s. They take them with them into their 30s. So they're like emotionally healthy from the beginning. That's my goal, okay? And so when I think about ADHD and I think about my own kid and his own struggles, like with his self-esteem, I'm not going to get into his details or anything, but in general, it is easy for a kid with ADHD to grow up thinking negatively about themselves. Here are some of the labels that kids with ADHD tend to give themselves because that these labels have been reinforced. So for example, you're a troublemaker. You're my problem child. You're lazy. You're stupid. You don't try hard enough. You don't reach your potential, which essentially means you're wasting your potential. You're wasting, right? You're a disappointment. You're too much, like quote unquote. You're too much, like you're intense. You're a lot. That leads the child to grow up feeling isolated, misunderstood, thinking they suck, and feeling broken. That's the last thing I want for your kids, because I actually am going to make a case for ADHD brains that they're pretty cool actually. If we accept the way they are and the way they think and what they need, and we love their brain, what they can offer is really, really amazing. Now, when we talk about self-concept, there's these two things. Brene Brown kind of explained this really well. She said the difference between shame and guilt is this. So shame is believing that something is wrong with you. I'm a screw up. I'm lazy. I'm a jerk. I'm selfish. I'm whatever, right? I'm a troublemaker. That's shame. Shame is when you create an identity around a behavior. When you create an identity around something that you've done. Guilt is when you are able to say, I did something wrong, and you externalize it. So shame is, I'm a screw up. Guilt is, I screwed up. Guilt is, I've made a mistake. Shame is, I am a mistake. Guilt is, I've done something wrong. Shame is, something's wrong with me. So one is internalized at your core, there's something wrong with you. And then one is externalized, that you've done something on the outside of you. At your core, you are good and lovable and worthy and perfect, and you showed up in a way that caused a problem. So we want to help our ADHD kids understand their brain is what is driving their behavior and how they think and how they don't think, right? So we want to help them understand, like, this is not you, this is ADHD showing up for you. And we want to teach them to separate their behavior from their personality or their character. That means that you, as a parent, really have to be able to separate their identity from their behavior. So that's the second rethinking ADHD that I'm offering to you, is that your kid is not their behavior. This is true across the board for any time your children are behaving. They are never their behavior. Their behavior is always an expression of their emotions or their unmet emotional needs, or they're trying to cope with a negative circumstance, or they're trying to change the circumstance so that they feel better. So your children's behavior are always strategies. And with ADHD, it's not necessarily sometimes a strategy. It's just like the way that their brain is working at that time, and they need support and help. So my goal is to help you understand ADHD more, because the more you understand, the more you can help your child understand. The more you understand what's going on for them, the more compassion you'll have, and then the less critical you will be. So that's why I really wanted to talk about this today. Now, I've got to warn you, I have 5 pages of notes. And so I don't think I'm going to get through everything that I have learned about ADHD. So I'm going to right now let you know what books I'm primarily using to source this conversation today. The first is called ADHD 2.0. It's by the people who wrote Driven to Distraction, Edward Hallowell and John Rady. And that book has really been helpful for me. I've also taken in a lot of consideration of Gabor Mate's book, Scattered Minds, and that's the origins and healing of attention deficit disorder. I found some good guidance in there. And then I'm also referencing a little bit of the book ADHD is Awesome by Penn and Kim Holderness. They're the ones from the Holderness families that always do those funny parody videos that you see on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. And so Penn has ADHD and he wrote this book. And I think there's a lot of beautiful tips and strategies in his book that are really easy to read and digest. So, like I said, altogether, there's like 700 pages of text here. I'm going to try to summarize as much as I can to be helpful to you. All right, so let me give you just a couple of examples of what it's like to have ADHD. If you have ADHD, you might hear this and be like, oh yeah, that resonates or that feels true. So if you're a little kid, ADHD is like this. Like imagine being in a really crowded room, like, a conference or a concert or something like that. It's just like a really crowded room and everyone around you is talking all at once, right? There's just a lot of noise. No one's talking to you, but you're just hearing everybody talking. And then somebody suddenly asks you, what did that person next to you just say? You would have no idea because you weren't listening to that one person. You were listening to the entire room speak. And that's sort of what it's like to have ADHD. A lot of stimulation, a lot of noise, a lot of things happening, and then you're asked to say what is one thing that's happening in this room. ADHD can't figure out what they're supposed to be paying attention to. Another example would be you're stuck in the middle of heavy traffic at an intersection and your engine of your car has stalled and you're trying your best to get moving, but then everyone is yelling and honking at you, but no one's offering to help. So for ADHD, they're the kid or the person who's in the traffic jam and their car is stopped and everyone is looking at them like, what are you doing? Come on, let's get going. And they're just trying to get back on, get back to it. They're stalled. So that overstimulation is very overwhelming for someone with ADHD. And then when they're put on the spot to answer what's happening right now, describe what you just heard, it's very overwhelming. Or if their engine is stuck and they gotta get it going, it can be very challenging. So another example was like I heard was that ADHD is like having a race car that you're driving. The engine is a race car engine, but you only have bicycle brakes. So once it gets going in one direction, it's very hard to stop and turn to another direction. It's like one track mind, but not always the track that we want it to be on. And then when we want the track to shift and want them to slow down or turn or be, the braking system is very, very difficult to get to activate. It's like stopping a train with, your arms. Like that would be impossible, right? So someone with ADHD, they don't have an illness. It's like an impairment, right? It's a disorder in terms of thinking of the word disorder, not ordered. So someone with ADHD, they don't have a lot of order in their life. They lack a sense of organization. They're not really able to consciously plan a sequence of activities. It's difficult for them to know where things are, know what they've done, what still needs to be done. It's a lack of order, which I think is a really cool way to think about it, is that's the executive function piece, right? When I decide that I'm going to get ready for bed, say, I have a whole system and routine that I go through. But when I first created that system and routine, it was innate to me. I was like, well, I'm going to put on my pajamas and then I'm going to go in my bathroom, I'm going to brush my teeth and wash my face, put on my moisturizer, turn off the lights, get in bed. So there was a sequence of events. For someone with ADHD, it's very difficult for them to create the original sequence of events. It's trying to find order within chaos. It's very difficult. So they need help defining that order and then keeping themselves on the track when they are supposed to be on that track. So it's a very big challenge for them. Their attention is disordered. Their life is disordered. Their energy is disordered. It's focused in the places that maybe it's not necessary at the time. I actually think that ADHD can be a really fun and interesting type of impairment, because the people with ADHD, they're not focused on time. They're not focused on, order, and they have a lot more spontaneity and creativity and flow available to them, and less restrictive in terms of what they should be doing. So there could be a lot of freedom in it, but it's just challenging when we live in a society that sort of demands order. So I want you to think of it as an impairment, and I want you to think of it as disordered attention and disordered life. Now, when you look at how it's diagnosed, the attention deficit disorder, we have the word attention deficit right in there. So it is a deficit of attention, but it's more like a difficulty in figuring out what to pay attention to. So someone with ADHD, they might have an attention deficit to something you want them to pay attention to, because their attention is being paid somewhere else. So it's a deficit in terms of where we want them to be focused. So we think of it as poor attention skills, inattention. But really, it can also be high attention, but just not where we want them to have focus. They also have impulse control issues. So someone with ADHD has difficulty delaying gratification, difficulty with procrastination, with understanding how time works, and getting to I have to do these 5 things before I can do this thing, making a sequence of things. They just kind of go to the 5th thing. They're just I'm just going to get there and rush and don't always go through all the steps. And then hyperactivity, which you can also think of as hyper aroused. So these are the 3 major features of ADD. Now, what does that actually look like in regular life? It's missing details, making careless mistakes, not staying on task, doesn't seem to hear when spoken to. Remember, they're not able to pick out what they should be paying attention to, so it's all sounds like noise to them. Trouble organizing tasks, creating order, creating organization. Avoiding tasks that require a lot of mental effort, because it takes so much extra effort to stay attendant, to pay attention to something that they don't care about, that they can't really overcome. They can, but it's hard for them to overcome the boredom obstacle. And so instead of overcoming it, they just avoid it. Avoiding is a huge, huge strategy that ADHDers use. I don't have homework. I already did it. It's not important. My test isn't today. They avoid it because the mental requirement to pay attention is so fatiguing. They'd rather just skip it. And then they feel bad later, and it actually can create a lot of anxiety. So they avoid those tasks that require sustained mental effort. They lose things easily. They're easily distracted, and they're often forgetful in daily activities. It's like if you were to say to someone with ADHD, go get ready for bed, and then while they're walking, like a little kid, they're walking to the bathroom, they notice a Lego guy on the floor. And then they pick up the little Lego guy, or, a barrette or something like that. And then they're in the bathroom, and all of a sudden they're playing with it. And they're like fixing their hair, or they're putting the guy and like washing him in the sink and creating a whole world for the little Lego guy. And you walk in and you're like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So in that moment, they actually need your executive functioning skills. They need to borrow your thinking brain, but it's so frustrating, right? As a parent, to let them borrow that. And we're so frustrated. That frustration is what they hear and feel so if we can drop the frustration and just say, hey, you can play Lego guy tomorrow as long as you get to bed tonight. Let's go. Right? You can delay that little gratification, that little motivation for tomorrow or later today. You know what? If you get your pajamas on and you get your teeth brushed before the timer goes off, then you'll have time to play Lego guy for a few minutes. So you can create small little dopamine event incentives in that moment. So that's inattention. Also hyperactivity. If you see a kid fidgeting, tapping, squirming, getting up without permission because they're just not paying attention to like what's happening around them. They're just like, oh, that clock is wrong. And then they'll get up and go fix the clock. Or like, oh, that window's open. I should close it. That's just the only thing they're thinking about. Older kids can be extremely restless, or younger ones, they run about, they climb, they unable to play or rest quietly. They're always on the go. They never stop. They talk excessively, blurt out the answer, trouble waiting to take turns, interrupting and intruding on others. Now, it's an important time to pause and say that all of these traits are common of children, okay? It's when we see these traits that are atypical for their age, like most kids have grown out of those behaviors and they're still doing them, or that these behaviors, even with correction, are present for at least 6 months. But we don't want to diagnose like a 3-year-old because a lot of these behaviors are pretty typical of 3. So a lot of diagnosis of ADHD happens around 6 or 7 years old. That's when kids have often moved. They have more control over their executive function. They have more control over their nervous system. They're able to self-regulate more. And you see a neurodivergence right around that point. There are a couple of phrases that I have found that have been really helpful for me to understand what's happening with my ADHD kid and other people in my life. So one is the phrase, boredom is kryptonite. This has to do with the poor attention skills. Unless there's a high interest in the topic or the activity, the ADHD brain has a lot of trouble creating motivation to pay attention. And so if they are bored, it's not that they willfully stop paying attention. It's that their brain just is so hungry for something new to think about, for something exciting, that it just starts to wander and play in the brain to find something a little more interesting to either think about, pay attention to, or do. So listening can be very boring. They have this tuning out, this absence of mind. And when they decide something is uninteresting, it's not decide, when something is uninteresting to them, they check out. Their brain checks out. It's not intentional. It's not willful. Now, if you're in a relationship with someone who has ADHD and you're talking about something that you think is interesting and they are not interested in it, they might tune you out. Or if you're a little kid and you're in your own brain, you're in your ADHD brain and you're playing and having a good time and you're playing your own game and it's very exciting to you, you might not be socially aware of what the other kids are playing. You might not be able to take your turn or wait. So it does create social problems. We want people to listen to us. We want people to play with us. We want there to be a give and take in play. And that can be hard for ADHD. And it's not because they're mean or selfish or not a good friend. So don't ever want you to be critical or judge your ADHD kids. Just notice that that probably means that they are restless and bored. Another part of poor attention skills is, like I said, that this phrase, they lack a template for order. That's really helpful for me. So boredom is kryptonite, and that the ADHD mind lacks a template for order. When I understand that my son has trouble creating a sequence of steps or a process, then my brain is so focused on process. It's so sequential and so step-based, as all my programs are. You can tell by my teaching, is that's just how I'm wired. Like I'm almost wired for order, while some brains are not, or they're wired for disorder. And if you recognize that, you can come alongside your ADHD child and help create order from the chaos in their brain. So ADHD mind lacks a template for order. They need you to bring it. Now, if you have ADHD or you're not very ordered, then you might want to sit with your ADHD brain child and create order together. And I bet it will be very fun and creative. You'll take lots of breaks. It'll be interesting. You'll come up with fun games. Like, let your brain guide. How would you want to approach learning this, and help your ADHD kid approach learning it too? So that's fun. Either way, you can support your children. The other two phrases that have been really helpful for me in understanding ADHD is the one I've already said, is like a race car for a brain with bicycle brakes. Just their brain is moving 200 miles an hour, and the brakes of like a bicycle, it's like not very strong. And so when you're trying to shift them from one activity to another, get their brain to focus from something to something else, you are probably going to need to work extra hard to really grab their attention. You can do that by creating a little game or a little challenge, a little motivation, a little short-term distraction so that they're more motivated. This fourth phrase has been really helpful for me, is that your ADHD brains, I might have to slow this down so you really hear me. ADHD brains only experience 2 times. Everything in their brain is either now or not now. So this is often called time blindness or time illiterate. If you tell an ADHD kid that you're going to leave for something in 2 minutes, they're like, great. Like 2 minutes is infinite to them. They don't hear 2 minutes. They hear now or not now. And then the now is what creates urgency. So I think about it as like emerging urgency. An emergency for ADHD is when things become urgent, and they can get a lot done at one time. They can be super fast because of that ability. Once they're motivated and they're paying attention, their full attention is on doing whatever it is that they've got to do. So they can hyper-focus when they have to. And they often only hyper-focus if it's motivation, that they're something that they want to be interested in. If they're not bored, they can hyper-focus, or they can hyper-focus when they have now. Like if it's now, then they can create urgency. So emergencies create hyper-focus, and high interest creates hyper-focus. So they can get a lot done in a short amount of time. But if you think about now or not now, that means there's no future. So it's very hard for an ADHD brain to plan for the future and to stay motivated in a long-term goal. So like graduating from high school, that's a really long-term goal when you're in 9th grade, or going to college. That's a really long-term goal. So we want to create more short-term goals. So thinking about some strategies, I wanted to offer you some strategies. So your child is not able, like we've said, to shift attention very easily. And so what we want to do is help them if they're stuck in one, either hyper-focus or inattention. We want to help them switch out of that passive attention into active attention or out of active attention into passive attention. We want to help toggle them from their prefrontal, like in their prefrontal cortex. So how do you do that? You give them a small constructive task that they should do right now. So like an easy dopamine or easy oxytocin hit. So you can say, that's why I love like the limit setting formula is so helpful for ADHD brains, especially short term. Like, Lincoln, you can get in the car once you have your shoes on. And it's time to put your shoes on now. And then he's like, what? Okay. And then he puts his shoes on and he gets in the car and he's super fast at it. And that is why you want to use that limit setting. Like if you have another kid that doesn't have ADHD, you could do a little bit more long term. Like, hey, as long as we're ready for school 5 days in a row, I'm happy to take you on Saturday to the park and play or whatever. But with ADHD, it's easy to be a little bit more close together. And you want to break those limits down into smaller fragments. So once you have your teeth brushed, you can wash your hands. Once your hands are washed, you can go potty. But you are teaching them, like you're staying close with ADHD. You're right there, like, okay, you've brushed your teeth. Now you're welcome to go potty after you have put your pajamas on or whatever the order is. So when they're little, you're trying to bring that prefrontal cortex. You have to work at creating the sequences and those routines and those habits and those patterns. That requires a lot of intentional parenting. And that's a challenge when you have an ADHD kid because you feel like they should know this already. And they don't. They can't. They're disordered. Their brain does not have a template for order. There's boredom is kryptonite. There's only now or not now. And that means that you have to create a little bit of that motivation. You have to create urgency. And you have to support them with the sequencing of events. Now, do you have to do this forever? Nope. You just have to teach the brain the sequence without waiting for them to learn it themselves. So I didn't have to teach Lincoln how to get ready for school for 5 straight years. Just focused on creating that neural pathway and that sequencing until it was embedded. But it took 6 months or something like that to get him into the morning routine. Took a long time to get him into the bedtime routine, to sequentially embed that neural pathway. I couldn't just teach it one time. I had to do it over and over and over again. And now he has that neural pathway. One thing I didn't teach him, which I regret, is I didn't teach him how to create a neural pathway for getting ready to do schoolwork. I just didn't really they didn't have a lot of schoolwork in elementary school. And so I didn't have a way to model that for him at home. And so we didn't really create a lot of pathways. In middle school, it was challenging. I was doing it as much as I could, and then the pandemic and it kind of all fell apart. So he had to create a neural pathway to getting schoolwork done really late high school and all in college, and he's doing it. He has a whole system now, and he has a routine, and then he's used to it, and then he knows what he needs in order to create that environment that is just the right stimulation, just the right motivation, just the right amount of breaks, all of that. So I want you to realize that you want to work with that ADHD brain instead of fighting against it, instead of judging it and criticizing it. You want to understand the main strategy here is that you are the warmly supportive adult that your child needs in order to learn how to regulate their emotions, regulate their attention, regulate their energy. All of those struggles for your ADHD kids, it's going to take them longer to learn it, but it's not impossible. And you're teaching them how to cue themselves and how to create order. And they might, even in high school, if they understand their brain enough, be like, I don't really have a good system for this. Can we talk about it? That's an amazing amount of awareness. Like I keep losing my keys, or I keep, speeding, or I keep running out of money, or I keep, my laundry's not done and I keep not having clean clothes. Like once they feel frustrated by those behaviors, if they feel that you're supportive and you're not going to criticize them and judge them and say, I've already told you this 100 times. Instead, they can come and say, hey, I need some help. Let's help me create a system here. That's like my favorite question in the world, by the way. If anyone ever asks me, help me create a system here, I'm like, yes, please. So when you think about your ADHD kid, I want you to remember that their brain works different and that they need your support, and they're going to need it longer than you think is necessary, longer than what is typical. And if you make that shift and you rethink ADHD in that way, I promise you'll have an easier time in your relationship with your kid. They will be more compliant because they actually do want to be compliant. They are motivated to please. They just have a disordered brain and they need your help. So if you approach them this way, they will feel closer, you will get more compliance, and they will feel better about themselves long term. So don't give up, don't give in, and don't get frustrated. And if you do get frustrated, come to the Calm Mama Club. I feel like almost everybody has kids with ADHD in the club. Maybe not, that's not true, but it does feel like we're all kind of in the same boat, working with kids with neurodivergence, or ourselves, we're neurodivergent, and we want support. So I encourage you, the Calm Mama Club, it's $30 a month. You get weekly coaching with me. We have specialty groups for parenting kids, teens. There's a full online course. There's the workbook, the handbooks, and you also have access to getting coached with me. So that's really cool. $30 a month, Calm Mama Club. We're going to link the books to the show notes. We're going to link the Calm Mama Club. Obviously, I always encourage you to book a consultation with me. And also just know, like, I've been through it. I've raised a kid with ADHD, and I'm happy to share my experience with you. So if you are curious, reach out and we can talk more about it. All right, mamas, a little longer episode, but I had a lot to say on this topic. I hope you're having a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Hey mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies, just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.